The International Monetary Fund has slightly raised its global economic growth forecast for this year to 3.2%. However, uncertainties remain high as trade conflicts centered around the US and China, rising interest rates, and the surge in artificial intelligence investments act as a double-edged sword for the economy.
국제통화기금 IMF가 올해 세계 경제 성장률을 3.2%로 소폭 상향 조정했습니다. 미국과 중국을 중심으로 한 무역 갈등과 고금리, 인공지능 투자 열풍까지 불확실성은 여전히 크다고 경고했습니다. Okay, so the IMF has raised its global economic growth forecast.
Right, just a little raise. It's a 0.2 percentage point raise up from 3%. That's what it was in July because that's when they expected tariff shocks. As
Yes.
Trump was throwing around all these crazy tariff numbers, 50%, 100%. Around the world, really causing a lot of shocks and drama around the world. And I think people thought that that was going to have a bigger effect than it actually did. I
Right.
think there's been a lot of deals made between countries that are not the United States, kind of shoring up their investments in other places. And that has weakened the dollar a little
Right.
bit. And so that's basically why we've seen that growth forecast rise.
성장률 3.2%로 상향이 됐죠. 7월 전망보다 0.2%포인트 상승한 겁니다. As Rich mentioned, 상승 조정 배경에는 예상보다 적은 관세 충격, 무역 합의 또는 예외 조치, 달러 약세 등이 있습니다.
Right. So 2% for the US. That's the forecast. The 3.2 is just for the globe, right?
Global economy.
0.9% for Korea, 1.1% for Japan. Japan's forecast was up to 4.8%.
China's forecast.
Sorry, Japan. Yes. Sorry, China. Why am I saying Japan? I can't say China. But China really steaming into the future. Actually, a lot of Western executives, when they visit China and see all the automation and the advancements in production that they've made in China, come back really scared about how basically Asia is taking over the world right now.
Yeah, the last time I went to Beijing, which was 10 years ago, I was really surprised because I went to a public toilet and they scanned my face
Wow.
and then gave me 2 squares of toilet paper.
That's how many they judge that you need.
The discrepancy between the advanced technology and then how many squares they would give me of the toilet paper.
It's based on your face size?
No.
It means you have a small face, I guess.
All right. So if we have a look at particular countries, 개개인 이제 나라들을 이제 개별적으로 보면 미국은 2%, 한국 0.9%로 이제 예상을 합니다.
네.
Okay, now the US-China trade conflicts, they are still ongoing, and how is that going to affect
Right.
the global economy?
Of course, that's certainly going to remain a risk. Those are the world's two biggest economies, the two biggest competitive economies in the world. So if those tensions continue and they can't reach some sort of an agreement, some sort of a truce, the IMF warns that global growth could fall actually by up to 0.3 percentage points.
In that case, we're looking at 2.9%
Right.
growth forecast.
Nice math.
Yes. 네, 무역 갈등이 여전히 리스크죠. 한중 무역 갈등. 이게 계속 지속되면 세계 경제 성장률이 최대 0.3%포인트 하락할 거라고 예상을 합니다. And that will bring it to 2.9%.
And of course, everybody is rushing to pour money into AI. AI, as we all know, is the big new thing that's shaking up the world these days. So people really love to invest in the new fancy thing. And so that certainly causes a risk of a bubble in that sector.
Many economists, many economic institutions are saying the same thing with regards to the AI bubble. They're saying it is a bubble, it's going to burst soon, so be prepared.
Right. It's like similar what happened with the dot-com bubble when the internet really got going.
That's right. 전문가들은 또한 AI 투자 거품 위험도 지적하면서 닷컴 붕괴와 같은 충격이 올 수 있다고 경고했습니다.
네.
Okay, so one expression that we use there, growth forecast, 성장 전망.
Right, an estimate of future growth. What's going to happen in the future? A forecast, of course, we usually think about the weather forecast, what weather is going to happen, but you can use a forecast in any situation where you're looking at what is going to happen in the future. And of course, businesses, governments, and individuals too make their plans based on forecasts.
Yeah, we make our plans based on past month income and expenses. And hopefully they do match your forecast, personal forecast.
But they don't always.
They don't always. That's why we have savings. Forecast, 예보, 예상이죠. 그래서 weather forecast라고 하면 날씨 예보인데 growth forecast라고 하면 경제 성장 전망입니다. 그래서 보통 뭐 IMF, OECD, 한국은행 같은
네.
기관이 매년 이거를 조정하죠.
That's right.
Double-edged sword, 양날의 검.
Right. A sword which cuts both ways, right? A situation which can have both positive and negative effects. You can cut somebody else with the sword, your enemy, but you can cut yourself too.
That's right.
Right? So a blessing and a curse, you can also say.
Yep.
Or we also say two sides of the same coin.
Double-edged sword. You can also say pros and cons, right?
Yeah,
there are
sure.
pros and cons to all
Exactly.
situations.
This one's a little more fancy.
That's right. The International Monetary Fund has slightly raised its global economic growth forecast for this year to 3.2%. However, uncertainties remain high as trade conflicts centered around the US and China, rising interest rates, and the surge in artificial intelligence investments act as a double-edged sword for the economy. Okay, let's move on to the next news.
This year's Nobel Prize in Economics was awarded to 3 economists who contributed to research on sustainable growth. The laureates advised that to keep the Korean economy on the right track, increasing the birth rate is essential.
올해 노벨 경제학상은 지속 가능한 성장 연구에 기여한 3명의 경제학자들에게 돌아갔습니다. 수상자들은 한국 경제의 지속적인 성장을 위해서는 출산율을 높여야 한다고 조언했습니다. Now, as is always the case, the Economics Prize was the last Nobel Prize to be announced. And this year it is going to 3 professors.
Right. Peter Howitt from Canada, Joel Mokyr, who's an American Israeli, and Philippe Aguillon, who is French.
Okay, did you specifically put Canada first? Is
Actually,
that the order?
that's just what it came out as, but
Okay.
I would have anyway. So what they did was they scientifically demonstrated that innovation is the key driver of economic growth, which I think many people, of course, already knew. That's pretty common standard knowledge. But they did it by mathematically modeling this particular concept. They called it creative destruction, which is basically how new technologies and products must essentially replace existing markets. That's the only way to boost economic growth. But of course, many people are against that because a lot of people don't like change. Change is difficult. Change can be costly.
Right.
If you're already in one industry that is about to get replaced, then you're not a fan of change. But that is the only way to keep things moving into the future.
That's right. Keep moving into the future in a sustainable way.
Right, exactly.
As you mentioned, it is one thing to know something, through gut feeling or through intuition, and then another to have a mathematical model to
Exactly.
back it up exactly.
Right.
Alright. 올해 노벨 경제학상은 혁신을 통한 경제 성장이란 주제에 대해 연구한 3명의 교수님들, 경제학자들에게 돌아갔습니다. They scientifically proved 혁신이 경제 성장의 핵심 동력임을 과학적으로 규명을 했는데, as you mentioned, creative destruction, 창조적 파괴 개념을 수학적 모델로 정립을 했습니다.
네.
And the conclusion is 사회가 변화와 새로운 아이디어에 오pen, 개방적이어야
Right.
지속 가능한 성장이 가능하다는 것을 강조했습니다.
Right. An important lesson in all aspects of life, really.
That's right. Now, the laureates, they said that South Korea was a good example of innovation leading growth. And then they offered very specific advice for Korea to continue on its growth path.
Right, because Korea has been the most historic case of economic explosion in the history of the world, really. So we all have been talking about the birth rate a lot in Korea lately, and that is one of the key factors of keeping that economic boom going in the country. They also emphasize that antitrust enforcement is essential in Korea. It means to enforce laws that prevent anti-competitive business practices like monopolies or like price fixing, collusion, that kind of thing. When you get really big companies that you have, of course, in Korea,
Conglomerates.
right, they can control the whole market, and that kind of stifles little companies from innovating.
That's right. You need healthy competition
Absolutely.
for the economy at large to thrive and grow and foster
네.
innovation. 수상자들이 한국에 대해서는 크게 두 개를 언급했습니다. 첫 번째는 출산율 상승해야 된다. 두 번째는 독점 규제 antitrust regulation 강화해야 한다. And that's the only way that you can have innovation, competitive market, 경쟁적 시장 환경이 만들어지고 혁신이 계속될 수 있다.
The only way
이렇게.
for sustainable growth, right?
Yes. 지속 가능한 성장, sustainable growth.
That means that you're able to grow, but you're not using up all the resources that you're going to need for future growth. So you don't just have one quick growth, it's slow growth that can continue on.
그렇죠. 일시적인 호황이 아니라 환경, 사회, 인구 구조까지 고려한 장기적 성장, 지속 가능한 성장을 뜻합니다. Sustainable growth.
네.
And we want to be on the right track.
We certainly do. We all do in all aspects of our life. It's something you can use in a variety of different situations. It just means you're heading in the right direction, the correct direction.
네, 그래서 수상자들은 한국 경제가 올바른 방향으로 나아가도록 하기 위해서는 출산율을 높여야 한다. 이렇게 조언했죠.
네.
So the laureates advised that to keep the Korean economy on the right track, increasing the birth rate is essential.
That's right.
Let's have a look at the news once more. This year's Nobel Prize in Economics was awarded to 3 economists who contributed to research on sustainable growth. The laureates advised that to keep the Korean economy on the right track, increasing the birth rate is essential.